Hello, and welcome to lesson number 4 in the Drawing is a Skill unit. In this lesson, we will learn to use guidelines and something called shape building. So what is shape building? It's when you use simple shapes as guidelines to make a complex image easier to draw. So here we have a photo of a flamingo, and then there's some simple shapes that are drawn on top of it. We draw those simple shapes lightly as a guideline, and then we fill in the more complicated details afterwards because now we know where everything belongs. The mindset that you're going to use in this lesson is create light, loose guidelines for accuracy. So here you can see, for example, look at the horse drawing. That's a complicated drawing of a horse, but if you look at the guidelines or the basic lines that you start with, you see that the horse is really made up of a bunch of ovals and circles. By using simple shapes that we already know how to draw, we're able to create more complicated drawings later. So why is it important to simplify? Okay, what if I told you you have 5 seconds to memorize this list of numbers? Go. Now, chances are being able to memorize this list of numbers in 5 seconds could be pretty difficult. They're pretty complicated. But what if I told you instead that you have 5 seconds to memorize this list of numbers? Do you think you'd be able to do a better job? So in drawing, it's important that we start with simple shapes that we're more familiar with, and then we can get complicated. So we're going to use these 4 simple shapes. We have a square or a rectangle, circle, triangle, and then an ellipse or an oval, which is just like a flat circle. And we're going to use those simple shapes in order to create complex drawings. So we're going to go from complex, which is the original idea, to simple, to complex. And remember, always sketch light to start. Let's start by doing an exercise that's going to teach you how to draw a circle. This exercise, you're going to use guidelines to draw your circle. You're going to learn what it means to keep it loose and how to use your whole arm to draw instead of maybe just your wrist. Now, this is going to be exercise number 4, assignment 6B. So this is the instructions. You're going to draw a circle or a few using only one line and your wrist, and I'll show you a demonstration of that now. If you notice, only my wrist and my hand are moving to create these circles. And what happens is those circles really aren't that accurate. They're kind of wobbly, they're a little bumpy. Here you can see I've started to move my whole arm to draw the circles instead, and they're a little more accurate. The next step in this exercise is to draw another circle. You're only going to draw one, but this time use your whole arm. Keep it loose and use guideline. Guidelines are lines or shapes that you put down on your paper first before you start to create your final drawing. They're meant as a guide, so we're going to use simple shapes and light lines to help us figure out where the final drawing belongs, what size it should be, what angle it should be. Now, when you're drawing your circle, the first thing I want you to do is hover above the paper and make a circular motion. Remember to use your whole arm. Now, bring your pencil down and start to make some light guidelines. After you've made some light guidelines, go back, erase the stuff that doesn't belong, and then use the guidelines to now create a more accurate circle. You're still going to have to go back and forth a few times and erase and redraw certain parts if they come out a little bumpy or if it's a little smushed on one side, but that's just part of drawing. Okay, now that you've learned how to use guidelines and how to draw a simple circle, let's figure out how we're going to do the shape building process. And remember, always sketch lightly to start. The instructions for this exercise number 4A are to use the shape tools in Google Slides to find the simple shapes of a flamingo. And then you're going to draw the simple shapes lightly using pencil into your sketchbook, right? Those guidelines. And then you're going to draw the contour lines of the flamingo and fill in the missing details. So what does this look like? In your assignment, you're going to have a photo of the flamingo. You're going to go up to the top. You'll see that there's a shape tool in Google Slides. First, I want you to choose a shape that you identify in the flamingo. So I identify a circular shape that makes up the head of this flamingo. Now I'm going to change the internal color of the shape to clear, and then change my line to something that's a little obvious. It stands out against the background, so I chose green. And then I am going to make the line a little thicker of my shape so that it's also obvious to see. Okay, so I got my head. And now what's another shape I identify? Well, I identify this oval shape for the body. Now in Google Slides, the shape tool can be changed by grabbing these handles on the sides. You can also change the angle of it by clicking and dragging that circular tool at the handle at the top. Put it in place and then move on to the next shape that you identify. So maybe this, let's see, maybe I'll start with the neck. Like the neck definitely looks like a long, thin rectangle, and it's kind of on an angle. So I'm going to draw that in. I'm going to use that circular handle to angle the rectangle a little bit, move it into place right on top of the flamingo's neck, and maybe make it a little bit thicker so it's a little closer to what I'm seeing. So I'm breaking down this complex flamingo into simple shapes. Here I'm going to add, let's see, maybe this would be another rectangle. So remember, we're only using rectangles, squares, circles, ovals, and triangles. All right, what about the tail here? The tail kind of looks like a triangle. So when you draw a triangle, remember, always change your border to the color that you want, change the inside to transparent, and I like to make the lines a little thicker. You can grab that circular handle and move it around. Now in a triangle at the top, you'll notice a little orange shape, and you can take that orange shape, click and drag it, and that will move the point of your triangle so that it fits closer over where you're trying to put it on top of the flamingo. All right, so keep using those Google shape tools to fill in or to trace out the rest of the flamingo. Try to figure out what simple shapes you can use to build up this bird. Okay, once you've got all of the parts of the bird broken down into simple shapes, move the photo away. And now we have an image of the guidelines that we need to use to create our drawing. So start out by drawing in each one of your guidelines, or guide shapes in this case, onto your sketchbook. Pay attention to how big things are compared to other things. So how long is that first rectangle compared to the second rectangle below it? How big is the oval compared to how long the neck is? So you're constantly checking back and forth the size and placement of each shape. But remember, drawing these simple shapes to start is so much easier than trying to just draw the flamingo without these guidelines. Also, don't forget to sketch lightly, because you will be erasing these guidelines after you get them put in. And be accurate with your guidelines. If something's not right, erase it and redraw it. All right, we're at the final step. So I have all my guidelines lightly sketched onto my paper. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do what we've been doing. I'm going to draw a contour line drawing of the flamingo. Don't forget to use all the tools that we have learned so far, right? You're observing this flamingo photo closely. So you should be looking at the photo at least 50% of the time, checking back and forth between the photo and your drawing. And as you're creating your contour line, you may notice that some of the guidelines that you created weren't exactly in the right spot, but now is the time to change them up a little bit as you're drawing in your final lines. Don't forget to keep your pencil lines loose for accuracy, to use your whole arm as you're drawing, and add in any details that you may not have been able to add because you were using simple shapes to start. So you could see I added in some of the feathers in the tail and some of the knee shapes. Erase. If something is not correct, you definitely want to go back and erase it. Keep working to make it as accurate as possible. And for the last steps, you can add in some of the details that you see on the inside of the bird, like the feathers. Go back and erase any of the guidelines that are still visible. Put in your finishing touches, and now you have a complex drawing of a flamingo created with basic shapes. All right, so go ahead back to Google Classroom. You're going to start with exercise number 4 at 16B. First, just draw a circle. Try to use your whole arm, keep it loose, and practice using guidelines. Once you're done with that, you'll be able to move on to exercise 4A, where you're going to use simple shapes to draw the flamingo by first creating your guidelines in Google Slides and then transferring them to a sketchbook and then filling in those final details. Good luck. I can't wait to see what you create.